all of you for joining on a snowy night after you've probably been cooped up all day. So thanks for your time and your attention. And I'm going to share my screen in my PowerPoint. And what I'm going to be talking about today is, did you press record, by the way?
I sure did. Of course, I forgot to do it until after I read your bio, so we'll have to just.
All right, there you go. I didn't see a little red dot. So we're going to be talking about topics that are applicable at any point in time or history, but also things that are exacerbated these days because of COVID and social distancing. So we're going to do a deep dive into childhood anxiety, depression, which could also be negative thought, and mental health. And so these are my therapy practices. My therapy practice is the Child and Family Art Therapy Center, where we do general psych, individual child therapy down to age 4. And so we can work with kids. And what I'm going to share with you is our very child-friendly way of talking about coping skills, how we can help kids through these difficulties. And I hope that you'll leave tonight with 3 to 5 to 7 actionable conversations that you can have with kids. And I'll also send out the PowerPoint so you can have, because being an art therapist, a lot of this is visual. So we have these coping skills posters that have stories. So I'm sharing things that really are applicable to kids probably 12 and under. And so when we talk about, anxiety or even depressive childhood depression, we can talk about nature or nurture. And the secret is it's always both. It's neither. It shouldn't be an argument. There's a 2-factor model. And so I have these 3 columns. When I'm getting to know a child, I want to know about the child holistically so it's called a neuropsychosocial assessment. And you'll see these 3 columns, the neurological factors, which are a child's brain wiring. And brain wiring, issues coming out of brain wiring could include intellectual disability, ADHD, sensory integration issues, high function, or just autism spectrum challenges, and so on, and learning differences. Those are all brain-based issues. So how someone processes the world. So that's the left column. We're going to skip over the psycho column, the psychological factors in the middle. On the right, we have nurture. We have the environment. So those are the social factors. And these also can be positives and strengths for a child, or they could also be stressors. If a child has issues or if something's going on, and these people or places add extra stress, that places a challenge on the child. So a child can have 2 different columns of challenge weighing on them. And then we have the middle column, your psychological factors. And you can see I have this icon of gears, and I selected that because this is what someone's psychology is for. Our psychological apparatus is basically a stress busting machine. Well, what does it do? It allows, let's say the child is 1 gear, and then the world is another gear, and we hope that the child will be able to mesh, to participate in the world in developmentally appropriate tasks, socially with peers and friends, and academically. Those are their 2 main jobs, learning and learning how to be social. Yeah. So we hope that they can mesh. But if the challenges from the left side, the neurology, can make it hard to mesh. If they're stressed out or overwhelmed by what's going on in the environment, that can make their gears slip, right? And that's what causes a child to have an emotional disorder, behavioral challenge. And so it's stress from the left or right column leaning in. And usually if a child is struggling behaviorally or emotionally, that's a sign, that's a communication that middle column, their stress busting machine, isn't quite yet developed enough to push back on that stress, right? They don't have the coping skills to manage that weight of emotion, of stress. And that's where we come in as supporters. So as a therapist, I try to work with the child on developing more additional coping skills. I will also work with parents and school and any other pieces of their environment to help them create the ideal support, so that way we can help those two things. The one thing you can't actually control is someone's wiring, so we might have to help the child adjust to their wiring if they have something complicated like autism or very complex learning differences and processing differences. So that's what we're talking about today, the psychological factors and how can we support the child's coping skills and teach them. And in order to do that, we're going to go to the next poster, which is really, this is a visual and concrete snapshot of the entire theory of cognitive behavioral therapy. So CBT has, discovered the fact that a behavior or a struggle isn't something that happens in isolation, but there's a very predictable process. So up at top, it says one. So one is the world. So the world is constantly spinning. It happens. You can't control that. And then you experience it. And that triggers three things in the cycle. Next, we usually have a thought, an immediate thought, something quick. Often, we're not always aware of the thought that we have about that situation. Sometimes we are. The younger the child, the less they know about, the less they are aware of their thoughts. The thought triggers a feeling, right? The feeling triggers an impulse to do something, so to do or say, right? So think, feel, do is the predictable cycle. And so you can see that the arrows continue to spin. And so jokingly, I'll tell that when I'm teaching this to young kids, I'll say, this is the toilet bowl of doom, right? Because you can flush yourself. You can go right down this cycle of negativity if you're not aware. And usually when kids first arrive in therapy, it's because they are flushing. They are spinning in their heads and in their feelings, and they're not aware. And most people, most grown-ups who are caring for them, we don't know, we don't see the invisible parts, the think and feel. Maybe we have a sense of what they're feeling, but we see the do, we see the behavior. But here I'm telling you, maybe to start to notice, well, what could be the thought that triggers that feeling? And what is the feeling that triggers that impulse to act? If the child, avoids, if they shut down, if they want to run and hide under a desk, right? If there's a meltdown, if they act selfish and don't share. So we're going to talk about the think, feel, do cycle. And there are two things in this cycle that we do have control over. And I teach kids that there are two things in this cycle that we don't have control over. And in the interest of time, and I'll keep going, and usually I make it interactive, but I'm just going to tell you for speed, the two things you cannot control are 1 and 3. We can't control what the world does around us, other people, right? And literally you can't control your feelings. Now you can modify them. If you want to cry, you can hold it in sometimes, right? If it's not too hard of a cry. But you can't not feel the way you feel. Your feeling is your truth, right? So you can't control those two things. The things you can learn to control or improve if you are in therapy or if you're motivated to learn are 2 and 4. You can learn new ways to think about the world, what's going on, and you could always learn new replacement behaviors. What can you do instead? And those are two ways that you can interrupt that negative cycle. And that's what we're talking about tonight, sort of in terms of a big picture framework. What are new ways that your students can think about what's going on? And if they can think something different, maybe neutral or positive, that'll help them to feel better. If they feel better, it'll make it easier for them to pick a positive behavior. And simultaneously, you can also work with the child on positive coping skills. Well, instead of balling up your fist and hitting that kid, can you take a break, right? Can you use your words? That's a do. That's an action, right? That's a positive replacement that we always, work with on kids. All right. So we're going to stop the negative cycle and insert positive responses in the think and the do things. I'm going to point to this, but this could be a 30-minute spiel as a part of a whole different topic on anger and frustration. But I wanted to include this slide for one reason and one reason only. When we're talking about feelings and you're supporting kids, once a child is in the red phase, if they're at a 10, so that you see the bottom of this chart, I'll explain it in a second, they are out of control. So if they're having a panic attack, if they're hysterically crying, if they're raging and having a tantrum, if they are eloping and running out of the room, there is no strategy for that. Their only job is to calm down, and you just need to keep them and people around them safe. Perhaps if you can escort them to a calming area. If a child is very stuck, you might have to clear the room and have the other kids leave until that child can calm down, right? Now, our collective job is to really teach a child the coping skills, so hopefully they don't go crashing all the way down to that red phase, that being out of control. But I just wanted to share this tonight because just to let you know that once you see that, literally you can say, okay, you're very upset right now. Your only job is to calm down, and I'll be here or I'll be nearby. If it's not a dangerous situation, if the child isn't sort of in attack mode, tantrum wise, if it's more of a tearful thing, you can move in closer and, put an arm around or however you would comfort a child with, appropriate boundaries for your setting, right? The other 3 phases, so we call this feelings GPS, and this speaks to different levels of intensity of emotion, different levels of arousal, so to speak, mental arousal. And so we have the purple phase, the yellow phase, and the orange phase. And these are all levels. Purple is like you're happy and relaxed. Yellow is a little frustrated, a little upset. And orange is, I'm getting there, right? I'm getting pretty upset. All these 3 are places where you can intervene. We can try to get kids to take a break, to calm down, to use strategies. And that's where all the things that I'm going to share come in. If you try to start talking to kids about the problem itself while they're in that red phase meltdown mode, they've lost control, you will either prolong the meltdown, that situation, or you might escalate it. So this is why it's just really important for you to identify that. Everything else that we're going to talk about tonight can be addressed during any other of these relatively calmer phases. Does that make sense? Just nod if that makes sense. You can let me know. Yeah, okay. Thanks. So now we're going to get into our topic itself. So we're going to have a little unit on negative depressive thinking, and then we're going to do a bit about anxiety, and then we're going to talk about how you can support both. So negative and depressive thinking is natural. And whenever I say something about something being natural, I want us to rewind our brains, go back in time to when human beings were at early stages of our social development, when we were sort of like cave people, or we were sort of like nomads, wandering, sort of prehistoric man, early man and woman. And there was a benefit for there to be a negative person in the clan, right? They're the people who are really great at noticing and pointing out what can go wrong, right? You need someone like that in the clan to make sure that people aren't walking off a cliff, right? Or some bold person's like, hey, let's go check out that cave. And they say, wait a minute, couldn't something go wrong in that cave? Couldn't there be like a bear in that cave? So to have someone who has sort of this negative type thinking, yes, it can be a downer in modern times. There are certain times where if it gets out of control, it really is harmful to the person. And that's what eventually at extremes can lead to someone feeling depressed or very down on themselves, right? But it is natural. And I want kids to know that you are not weird or messed up. Like, you are having these natural thoughts. But the question is, are they helping you, right? Do you gain anything out of this? And usually the answer is no. So that's a question you can ask a child if you're working with them. I know that you think you're never going to be able to do this homework, right? You're never going to be able to do this, or, you're expecting this to stink, right? To not be good, but does that thinking really help you? What does that do for you? So some people are, you can see this, I didn't draw this, I got this off of Google. His t-shirt says born this way. And again, that's only partly true. Some people might be wired in a way that leans sort of towards this type of negative thinking, this protective thinking. But then something about them being in their environmental loop, their feedback loop with the world, really, I think, strengthens that. And that's where we come in. We're going to try to help weaken that negative cycle. So here's the first coping skill poster I'm going to share. And I often teach this at the very outset of therapy, because when a child is coming to me, they feel like life happens to them. And they're kind of passive players in their life, and it's called having an external locus of control. And so the child thinks the world happens to me, and I'm at the mercy of all these, bad things. But my first message in therapy is, wait a minute, you're on your road to happiness and you actually have a choice. You don't have to go all the way down to sadness or upset. Let's talk about this. So we tell a story and you can repeat the story. And again, as a reminder, I will send out the slides to anyone who registered. And so take the road to happiness. Pretend that you are in that car. You are on the road, right? You're driving along. And then you're having a perfectly good day. And then the road, you can see it ahead, it splits, right? There's a fork in the road. And one path is the road up to the road to happiness. But if you're not careful, if you don't see the warning signs, the signs, you might go bumpity bumping and crashing down the road to unhappiness, the road to sadness or anger, the road to misery. Right? So right there where the road splits, we call that decision point. Something happens and you actually have a choice. You have way more control than you ever thought about your reaction. So this is the first thing that we say. Well, what do you do? What do you do at decision point? How do you take the road to happiness? I always ask kids, everyone that I work with, which road would you rather be on? It's just a motivational question. And every kid goes, ooh, with a quick hand, the road to happiness, except for the most oppositional child. Someone who's super oppositional, they love to say, I want to go down the road to misery, right? But at decision point, we have to do one thing. We drop that stop sign and stop and think. You gotta stop and think. Well, what are you thinking? Well, what might happen if I do X, Y, Z? How will this work out, right? This is what we're teaching kids. And of course, the younger the child, the more impulsive they are, the harder it is. And even some older kids still have impulsivity, especially if they lean towards the ADHD type functioning, right? And nevertheless, we still want to introduce this and then start to teach kids that you have the choice, and all the different coping skills that I teach you are your decision point. You could decide to use this coping skill or that coping skill that would take you up the road to happiness. Or maybe you can also see, if you start to go down the road to unhappiness and you start to feel it in your body, maybe you can correct, right? You can still self-correct possibly. And there are some other paths that can lead up, if you see the warning sign. So you control your choices. And if you can start to notice and reflect every time you see a child making a decision, you can teach the child that they have self-direction. They can make the choice. And if a child holds the door, if a child is holding a brown marker and they look at it, they recap it, no, oh, you changed to red. That's a choice. So catching and framing all the little choices that a child makes will help them to see how many micro decisions they have all day. And then it'll help them eventually to make the big decisions. Right? So we're still going to linger a little longer in negative thinking. This poster, I would say, skews a little bit older. There's a little more language on the paper. And so this might be for like the upper half of elementary and certainly older. And we talk about, with what lens do you see the world, right? And so it's helpful if you have some prop glasses, sunglasses, or if you can have kids have sunglasses, put them on, take them off. How does the world look when they're on, when they're off? How does it change? And so we just talk about the metaphor in the image of, here we have glasses, and glasses change the way you see things, right? They change the way you see. And so I teach kids that, there are dark negative lenses and there's also rose-colored glasses, right? It's a popular saying, that person has rose-colored glasses. And then we might have to say that, what do you think of when you think of roses? Well, it's love, it's, happy, they smell nice. So it's positive. So rose-colored, positive connotations, right? And so now we all walk around the world with a certain set of lenses on. And some people walk around with the top two bullet points: nothing works out, people are against me, right? I stink, I'm no good, you can go on. So if you walk around with that lens on your face, if that's the lens you have on, what's going to happen at all different points of the day? And so again, you can see at the bottom, we have think, feel, do, back from that earlier slide. And we're going to go through an example. And we're going to do this on the negative side, or we're going to do it on the rose-colored side. So here's my example. Quick story. Let's pretend that you are walking down the hall. You're carrying a load of books, right? Your arms are full of books, and you walk, and someone's coming the opposite way, and they're carrying some stuff. And then you just happen to clip yourselves. You're too close, and you both drop your big pile of books on the floor, right? Now, if you have these dark negative lenses on, nothing works out. People are against me. What are you going to think, feel, and do? Right? So these are some answers that this child or this group came up with. Is he crazy? What a jerk. He did it on purpose, right? These are thoughts that absolutely are going to follow if you have that lens. And of course, if you think, what a jerk, you're going to feel angry. And what might you do? You might get physical. You might push them or shove them. You might curse. Maybe you kick his books, right? So think, feel, do follows the lens that you have on, right? But now let's shift to the other side, okay? And let's put on rose-colored glasses. So take off your dark, dingy ones, try on rose-colored glasses, and there you might have a different lens of, well, sometimes things work out. You know, I can problem solve things that don't, and most people are trying their best each day, and nobody's perfect. So let's put those as your lens. Okay, same story, you crash into each other, the books drop. But you think that some things work out, I can problem solve, and most people are trying their best. So what new thing would you think? And this group said, well, maybe it was an accident. Wow, what a different thought from the same story. Okay, so what feeling goes with that? Maybe I'm a little annoyed, but I'm mostly happy, I'm calm. And so what do you say or do? Go, oops, you ignore it. Maybe you help each other clean up your books, or things that people say. So look at the difference, right? Whatever lens you have on, it completely changes the way your day goes. So which lens do you think would be a better one to have on? What do you think, group or student? And they always say rose-colored. And I always have to just tweak this for older kids. They're saying, well, are you telling me to be like totally optimistic and, you know, basically like pie in the sky? And I say, no, not necessarily, you know, but what I am saying is maybe you can do something that's a little bit like neutral. Like, I'm not saying that people are great, you know, but it says most people are trying their best and they're not perfect. Is that a true statement? So we want you to just try on the lens for a week and let's see, right? And then if the child reacts really well, if they actually do put on the positive lens, make sure you catch and reinforce it, right? Say, wow, that was really a rose-colored reaction. What did you think about that, right? If the child actually has a big reaction, a negative reaction, you can use the same poster to help them review. Ooh, which lens do you think you had on with that reaction? You know, you kicked and you called him a jerk. Yeah, that's probably the dark negative one. So then your question could be, well, what would be a rose-colored thought? You know, could we put it on that side and see if they can fill in the blanks? So it's a visual and concrete way to start to talk about the difference. You know, what are the benefits? Which colored glasses would you like to have on? So this, again, is a great intro for older kids. And here is instant positive thinking for any people of any age, actually. And this is great to do with a prop if you have younger kids, if you want to make it, you know, very active and visual. Get 2 cups, usually glasses, something clear, or bottles, and fill them up just about exactly halfway. We're going to talk about the difference between glasses half full and glasses half empty thinking. And it's fun if you have dye in the water, so, you know, kids can really see, you know, the levels of water in it. And I tell them the story about these 2 cups. So let's say there are 2 identical twins with the same, you know, DNA, right? They have the same genetics. They're getting next to each other, and they both have their favorite drink. Let's say it's a Yoo-hoo. They're drinking Yoo-hoo today. And so they both drink it, and they both drink it exactly to the halfway point. The brother with the red thought bubble thinks, oh, he looks at it and goes, this stinks. I only have half left. This stinks. The blue brother, the one in the blue thought bubble, says, well, at least I still have half left, right? And oh, I can't wait to drink the rest of it. So which one of these two brothers seems happier, right? So the kids say the blue one. Well, how come? Because basically this is an instant gratitude, right? Well, at least. So even if there's something bad going on, you can still try to find the silver lining in it. So find the silver lining, and you can prompt kids by saying, you can say, ooh, that glass half full or half empty? You said that stinks. What would be a glass half full thing to say? And you can even prime them by saying, well, at least, and have your voice trail off. Well, at least, can you say, well, at least? Well, at least, blah, blah, blah. And I give a personal example to kids in which I say, a few years ago, my grandmother died at the age of 102. And she was my favorite person in the whole world. So it was very sad. But I was doing so many well at leasts, even when with a very sad story, because I said, well, at least I had her for 47 years of my life. Well, at least my two kids got to enjoy her, and she was very sharp and with it the whole time. So my kids got to have her till they were 16 and 18. So well, at least. You can well, at least. Even death, right? There can be a well, at least. So again, you have to know your audience if you're talking about, someone dying. But so try to get kids to say well, at least, or at least fill in the blank if you prime them. Glass half full. Well, at least I still have this. I want to give one more slide dealing with negativity and ways to talk about it. This is a dual slide thing. On the left, we have this concept called turn the corner. And this actually applies to both anxiety and sort of negative thinking. In life, we are all walking down the street, and when there's a corner, we can't see around the corner, right? We can only see straight ahead. So we don't know what's around each corner that we face. So if you think about it, how do any of us get up and face the day? Right? How do we go into our day? We we show up in our lives, and we can plan as much as we plan, but still we don't know exactly how it's going to go. So we have to improv it. But people who are negative, right? If they have sort of negative thinking, depressive thinking, they think, oh man, this is going to stink. Whatever I'm going to do, this is not going to go well. This is going to stink. And the anxious person thinks more anxiously, what if? What if this happens? What if that calamity happens? So what if anxious thinking is what if this, what if that? And negative depressive thinking is this is going to stink, right? It's not going to work out for me. So I call that person the decider. You've decided ahead of time how your life's going to go, even though you don't know how it's going to go, right? How can you do that, right? And on the left slide, you see around this corner, yes, truly, there could be a sad face, there could be a frustrated face, but just as easily, couldn't there be a happy face, right? So why are you deciding that it has to be that? My mom called my grandfather the prophet of doom because he leaned towards this kind of thinking. And he wore a trench coat to the beach because he didn't want to get wet if there was a rainstorm, if there a potential rainstorm, even if there wasn't one called. So the decider, this is going to be tough. This might be scary, right? So you're deciding, and that raises your anxiety and it raises your avoidance of doing things. So instead, we came up with a character called the handler, which is the opposite of the decider. The handler turns the corner, right? Turn the corner and says, okay, I'll try it, right? I'll figure it out. I'll give it a try. And those are people that can live their life with less stress and anxiety, and then they're going to try problem solving when something comes up, if it's not happy. They're going to try to take the road to happiness, right? Does that make sense? So you can compare and contrast creating a character for kids if you just lay it out this way. It's hard to turn the corner if you're the decider, but if you're the handler, you turn the corner. And then back on the slide on the left, we have instant problem solving, a little strategy of if then. So if I turn the corner, so if I have a frowny face, if something unhappy is happening, then I will do blah, blah, blah. Right? If I'm frustrated, then I will use my words, right? Then I'll take a break. So For every if, there has to be a then. And your students and your child can become confident turning the corner if they can practice this if then. If they can start to realize and get confidence that they can improv life and they can solve it with an if then, they'll get bolder, they'll get more confidence, stress and anxiety will go down by repeatedly doing problem solving. And this is our instant problem solving formula, if then. If blank happens, then something will happen. By the way, everyone, we didn't say that we will do Q&A at the end. So I see that the chat was flashing, but I can't, it's hard for me to talk and do chat at the same time.
Yeah. So I put a little note in the chat just saying that if someone thinks of a question, they can put it in there just to get it down.
Great.
But that we'll try to address it at the end, since I know it'll be hard for you to address it in the moment.
Yeah, great, thanks. All right, let's keep going. Right, so this takes us to the end of the sort of the negative thinking piece. Just what lens are you wearing? Right, the glass is half full, and you can start to talk about, are you the handler or the decider? Who are you, and who would you like to be? Who seems like they're a happier person? Who seems like they're a more successful person? So we're going to start there. Now let's shift gears and talk about anxiety a little bit. And we call this your personal power project, because when kids feel anxious, anxiety makes them feel small and weak in the world because they feel so vulnerable. Like something's going to go wrong and I'll be a deer in the headlights and I won't know what to do. And as I said, it's fueled by the phrase, what if? So anxiety also is normal and expected. And anxiety is a brain-body mechanism present in most animals, right? It's the mind and body are connected. And so, but interestingly, real fear is in the present, right? I'm scared if there is a rabid dog, backing me into a corner, I'm scared. That's not anxiety, right? That's in the present. I am scared for my life. And then 10 minutes later, I may still be feeling fear, so it's in the past. I got out of it, but I'm still feeling fear, right? Anxiety is more anticipatory. Right? Anxiety, it hasn't happened yet. And we are the only organism, the only animal that is able to consider a future. And because of that, we really can project our fears far into the future. I have some parents that I work with saying, oh my gosh, my 6-year-old is never going to make it to college and get a job. That's really projecting far into the future. And so anxiety and worry is anticipatory, and anxiety is normal. So an anxiety disorder is only at that threshold, that point, when it gets in the way of functioning. When someone starts to get so anxious that they're avoiding tasks or activities or people, right, that they need to be able to interact with. The gears, remember the gears from earlier. So it's when anxiety gets in the way. So let's talk about anxiety in child-friendly terms. And so we call it nature's alarm. Anxiety is nature's alarm system. And the top image is a deer that I mentioned. And you can see that this deer is facing a wolf along that top line. So the deer is eating its leaves, munch, munch, munch. And then all of a sudden, here's crackle, crackle. And all of a sudden, its senses go on high alert. Its ears perk up. Can I hear anything else? Its nose, it starts to sniff, right? And all these things are highlighted in this poster where you see there's a circle around the head. The head is thinking really fast. It's breathing very quickly and shallowly. It's kind of panting. And that its heart is racing too. This is the instant fear response. And it's nature's alarm. What we can't see inside the deer is, with the fast breathing, getting more oxygen, and the heart beating so fast, it's shooting adrenaline to all the different body parts. And so it's powering up and it's making the muscles all stiff and strong to run or fight, right? Fight or flight. And so then I made these marks along the deer's neck because the deer's neck gets stiff. Its legs get full of energy and they want to just jump. So, and that's all preparing the deer to either charge if it has antlers or run away if it's a doe. So this is natural. This is nature's alarm. And if there are a lot of wolves and they're close, nature's alarm is loud, right? It's very loud and it really makes the deer run away, take action. If the wolf is far away, it's more mild, right? And if there's no wolf around, the deer is calmly eating, right? The whole body calms down. Well, let's now compare that to us, and you can see the human figure below. And guess what? We have the same exact alarm system that deer have. And so, we're breathing fast, our heart's pumping, that makes our head spin. It's hard to think clearly. And then at the upper ends, the highest end of the panic attack, of nature's alarm, is a panic attack. When someone gets so overwhelmed that they can't do anything, they're crying, and maybe they're shutting down, right? That's fight, flight, or freeze. There's the freeze part. So they just cry and they shut down. So, well, why is it that we have the same alarm system that a deer? And we get to talk about how we used to live in the wild before we developed cities and things. So the question to your student is, do you live in the wild? Do you live in the woods without shelter with deers, with packs of wolves surrounding you and hunting you? And the answer in civilization is no, right? You do not. So is there a wolf trying to kill you in the halls at school? Some kids with a sense of humor will say yes, but we know the answer is in fact no. So therefore, do you need to have such a loud alarm? Does an alarm of that volume help you in a school situation when you are safe? So the question is, is your life in danger here? Is a wolf trying to eat you? And that leads to our first anti-anxiety coping skill, the bottom stuff in the green sort of turquoise writing. We're going to quiet down nature's alarm. And essentially, it's nothing more than a relaxation technique, but we have the preamble helping kids to understand that it's normal and it's, all these bodily functions. And when we do these things, we're going to quiet down those body functions so you're not as uncomfortable. That's what makes kids so impulsive around anxiety or oppositional, because they're so uncomfortable. They hate the tension in their body, the butterflies in the stomach, it all feels so awful to them. So here's what we're going to do. And I'd love for this to be participatory. So please do this with me. So the first step is to ask a child who's starting to look anxious, or they're getting to, or saying like, they want to avoid something. I don't want to go there. Well, first, is a wolf trying to eat you? So that's a little bit, there's humor there, right? It's a little paradoxical, because of course the answer is no. There's no wolf trying to eat you. Okay. So maybe you don't, so that question is, the answer to that is no, and you don't need such a strong alarm. So if not, would you like to quiet down your nature's alarm? Let's take a few deep breaths. So this is why adults have been telling kids to take deep breaths all their lives, but the kids never understood why we had to do it. So we call them 7-11 breaths. And this is a structured way to help even very young kids relax, because sometimes kids don't know how to take deep breaths, or if they're panting, they'll just pant. They'll be like, and they say, I'm doing it. But if we do the counting method, it actually helps to slow them down. So we call it the 7-11 breaths, both borrowing, from the convenience store and then also for counting. So let's all pretend you went to 7-Eleven and got your favorite hot beverage. So you're holding it in front of you. Everyone hold your favorite hot beverage in front of you. For me, it would be a hot chocolate with a little bit of their cream in there. And so first, we're going to inhale. We want to smell it and smell just how delicious it smells. So we're going to inhale for the count of 7, hold, but then it's too hot to drink. So we're going to blow on it to cool it off for the count of 11, right? So let's all try this. We're going to do it 3 times. And I'd love it if you can report, you can eventually unmute yourself and tell us how your body feels after 3 7-11 breaths, only 3. Ready? Everyone, so take your hot drink. And ready, we're going to start to inhale. Ready, get set, go. So inhale for the count of 7. Hold it and blow it way out for 11. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Good. Let's do one more time. Inhale for 7. And blow it way out for 11. 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Good. Last one. We're going to inhale Really smell your hot chocolate. 7, hold it and blow it way out for 11. Cool that off. 10, 11. All right. Anyone, feel free to unmute yourself and just say, how does your head feel? How does your chest feel? Your stomach? What do you notice after 3 7-11 breaths? Alana, did you unmute?
Yeah. I was gonna say, I feel like a little more sharp actually. Like I feel like I was like a little foggy and now I'm like a little sharper.
So you turned over the oxygen in your lungs, which disperses to your body, and then your heart pumps it through your blood and it reaches your brain, right? Very good. Any other just quick feedback? Maybe 1 or 2 more instant responses.
You can also put it in the chat. That's always an option I
you
give
can
my
put it in the chat
students. If you don't want to talk out loud, feel free to put it in the chat.
I was going to say that it was so calming that I wanted to keep going. 3 wasn't really enough.
Right, you could always do more, but for kids, instant calming, they don't want to do, a lot of kids don't want to do a whole 2-minute mindfulness thing, but with 3 breaths, plus we're going to add number 3 now. So now let's say you're taking your 3 deep 7-11 breaths, and then also we're going to add shake it out, right? Because remember, if you're tense, if you're ready to fight against a wolf, your body's all tense, your neck is tense. So we want kids to shake it out. They can even get wiggly, shake it out. So if you're doing this motion, it's hard to stay stressed because you're loosening everything up, right? So stress it out. You can roll your shoulders fast. So just get wiggly. And then if you put it all together, you say, 1, is a wolf trying to eat you? No. So let's breathe. We're going to take our 7-11 breaths and shake it out at the same time. Let's just do 1 7-11 breath with the wiggles. Are you all ready? Can we multitask? Ready, get set, go. So breathe, suck in, and shake. All right. Congratulations. You all have quieted down nature's alarm, right? That's it. That's how we do it. You can feel it. Some kids report that their stomach feels more open. Some kids say, oh, I feel dizzy. Some kids say my chest feels relaxed. So kids will report different things when we do that experiential, right? But it all starts with, it's normal. It's nature's alarm. Let me check time. Okay, we're good. I'm going to quickly talk about the next critical piece. So that's just managing anxiety symptoms, right? Right, the stress, the tension in the body. But if you want to help a child actually push back on stress and maybe even shut it down so they don't have that same worry thought, we say the truth shall set you free. And so we're going to boss back the worry bully with the truth. So we're going to say that you have a little bully in your brain that wants you to be stressed out. And do you want to be stressed out? No. So the truth. So you can see the green person there, the green worry bully is saying, what if, as we said, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I get stung by a bee, right? I'm scared of bees. What if I get stung, right? But orange confident friend over there is saying, be quiet. The truth is blank. And this is where we want the kids to go. And so we're going to use the past and we're going to use facts and truth. And so the past is on the left side. And so again, this has a little more language. This might skew a little bit older, not so much for preschool, but certainly for easily 3rd grade and older. Kids can really do this pretty effectively. So the past is, first I'll talk about the sun. Where does the sun rise? The east. 3,000 years ago, where did the sun rise? The east. How about 300 years ago? The east. How about 30 years ago? The east. What's the pattern? The sun always rises in the east, right? 3 days ago. So if I ask you 3 days from now, where is the sun going to rise? What part of the sky? So say the east. And I ask them, well, how do you know that? How do you know? Because from the past. And this is where people who have a lot of anxiety, they actually don't pull from their history and they don't use facts effectively. They get distorted and they forget things that they know. And most of the way that most people who are not anxious organize themselves in life is we actually use the past as precedent, right? And that helps us to know whether or not we should be stressed about something. So the past. So that's how we sell it. And so we're going to say, so then for kids, you can make it really concrete to show their past. If you draw a circle, and you can see I have all these yellow dots in there to represent all the days of their life. If a kid's 10 years old, that child's been alive for 3,650 days, right? 365 times 10. And, and then you can, get out your just phone calculator and quickly do the math. So you have 1,700 days that you've been alive, Jimmy. Okay. And then whatever they're worried about, you ask them, how many times has that actually happened? And you can see in this picture, there are 2 darker dots. So we were talking about bees, getting stung by bees in this example. So this child said, well, out of 3,000 days of being alive, I've been stung all of twice. So at the bottom, we want the child to be able to say, most of the time blank happens, or blank rarely happens, or almost never happens. I almost never get stung by bees. That is the truth about your past. You almost never got stung by bees, So if for 2,998 days you were not stung by bees, do you think you're going to be stung tomorrow or today? Is it likely or unlikely? Unlikely, right? So that's the first part. The second part we do, then we go with truth. And the truth is pretty much anything you could do a Google search on. And so I work with this group and I said, hey, everyone, what do we know? What are some facts? What's the truth about bees? Do bees eat people? No, bees eat honey. So they don't want to eat you, right? What's another truth? Some kid said, if you don't bother them, they won't sting you. That's the truth, right? They don't want to. They don't want to sting you. Why? What's another fact about bees? This group said, some kids said, some very smart little young biologists said that bees will die after they sting you. So they don't want to, right? They don't even want to sting you. So if you leave them alone, they're not likely to sting you. So now we have this series of 4 or 5 facts about bees, right? And then you can make a chart. Here's what a chart looks like. If you go left to right on this chart, you have the worry thought. So what if, and then you have fact, and you have history, and then you have a new happy thought. So you can make this 4-column thing with a child if they are stressed about homework. Oh, I'm scared I'm going to get something wrong. I'm scared I'm going to get a good grade. For those kids who are like perfectionistic overachievers, you can really help them shut it down. Apologize for this. It's bizarre. You can help them to shut it down by saying, history, have you ever flunked a test? No. Most of the time, what kind of grades do you get? Let's write this down. Most of the time, I get great grades. I get checks and smiley faces, or A's and B's, right? And fact, so you can use facts. And then they come up with a happy thought. Oops. And so this is what the chart looks like if we're just making it, computerized. What's your worry thought, right? So what if, write down their what if this happens, what if that happens? Then you try to get up to 3 to 5 facts, things you could look up about that situation. And then we write down your personal history. How much does this actually happen to you? It rarely happens. And then what's your new helpful thought? And then you write this down, and this can become your child's power mantra. This is how your child can be like, well, everything will probably be okay, or probably won't get stung by the bee. This one was a kid who was scared of being in a plane crash flying. I can distract myself. I can think about how excited I'm going to be at my destination. I'll most likely have a safe flight by history, right? Anyway, I'm going to skip these to get to what you can do. I want to make sure that we get to your counterintuitive support strategies. I'm aiming to end my presentation part right at 8:30, and then we can do our Q&A. I think that's right. So here we go. Is that right, Alana? We good?
Yeah, I think technically we had just until 8:30, but if you're okay with staying on for a couple minutes, I'm sure people would be grateful. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I actually thought that we had.
I could be wrong. That was, right. Who knows? But I think that'll work out as if you're cool with staying, that would be great.
Yes, definitely. I would love to finish and make sure that you all have this stuff. So let's keep going then. So now here's where, so besides just all these different ways to talk about it with kids, now there's the part about how grown-ups support kids when they are feeling stressed in the moment. And so number one answer on the board here, be careful about reassuring. Caring people, loving parents, loving teachers, our instinct is we see someone suffering and they're stressed and we want to reassure. We want to stroke their back and say, no, it's going to be okay, right? Child comes up and says, I've had kids who are actually like sort of germ phobic and they keep coming back to a caregiver saying, am I going to get sick if this happens? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to get sick? And each time they come back for reassurance, it actually maintains the child's dependence on you. They are not the copers. The adult becomes a security blanket. And so that actually strengthens the anxiety, believe it or not. It prolongs the anxiety and it makes the child feel more weak themselves, because whenever they leave your side, the grown-up side, their obsessive thinking comes back, and so they get anxious again. They run back to the grown-up, they get reassured. I feel better with you, and they leave. And this is a cycle that happens that actually can prolong a child's anxiety. So we do not want to do the poor baby, the stroke on the back. Instead, we want to flip it. And I call it Jeopardy-style coaching. And of course, Alava Shalom, Alex Trebek just died recently. But Jeopardy inspired, at least gave me a cute catchphrase to describe this approach, which is heavy and question form. We want to use questions because this way, rather than you doing the reassuring, you give the gift to the child to do the coping thinking and the rational thinking. Very key to flip the engagement. And this is the number one thing for any grown-up to know. Let's see, I want to go to this one. We want to flip to empowering engagement. So if a child comes up to you and says, well, what if this happens? You can flip it and say, well, how do you want to handle this? What's one thing you can do? And if they are on the really calmer end of that, remember the emotional GPS with the different colored phases? If they're in the first 2 or 3 of those, purple, yellow, or orange, they may be able to answer some of these. How do you want to handle this? And then the child can come up with a kid-friendly, child level response. What do you want to do about this? If the child has learned how to boss back their bully, you can say, can you boss back your bully, your worry mind, or your worry bully? Or, can you do a well at least, right? Remember we talked about well at least with the glass half full. So can you try this? Can you try that of your strategies? If the child says, is this going to happen? That's reassurance seeking. And you can say, well, what do you think? What do you really think? So you're still there. You are allowed to say, you sound anxious. So there you can give empathy, but it's not the poor baby reassurance, right? Does that make sense? I want to make sure that that's really clear, the difference. You can still give empathy. You can still come off as caring. Wow, you sound really anxious about this. Okay, what can you do about it, right? How do you want to handle it? What do you think, right? And then if the child says something, even if it's not like a perfectly conceived grown-up level solution, but if you're like, go ahead, try it. If they said anything that they could do, all right. Quick example, my daughter, who Lisa taught, was a very shy, slow to warm up little girl, sort of pre-anxiety. She wound up not being anxious, but as a preschooler, she was attached to our hips. She sat on our laps at any kind of event or play or anything. But she did have some nighttime fears about monsters in her bedroom. And I was just learning this stuff. So I went to her and I said, Emmy, well, what do you want to do about the monsters? And she said, I want to get a monster spray and spray the monsters and make them go away. So we got, just an empty, clear, just squirt bottle, that didn't have any chemicals in it, filled it up with water. And I was like, okay, you hold it. So you be powerful. You have the power. And you go around and you decide. So she squirted this doorknob. She squirted a radiator, 2 little squirts. She squirted the rug in a certain space under her bed, which is where monsters love to hide. And, And we said, you just do it until you feel like you got all the monsters out. And she did it. We said, like, how do you feel? She said, I feel proud of myself, And so this is your personal power project. So even if a kid comes up with a magical thinking, a magical way to solve it, you can do that. Or it could be a real coping skill, a real grown-up, suggested coping skill. Again, so watch for too much empathy. Be aware of yourself. Because the child's mind stays undisciplined and they keep going back to anxiety. But also, I want to add tonight, the other extreme of caregiving is the loving position of, come on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Just deal with it. You can do it. This thing you're scared of is silly. So we're also at risk, and half of grown-ups lean towards the reassurance side, and the other half of grown-ups tend to be the just deal with it grown-ups. And they're a little more pushing the child, like, just do it. But this approach also doesn't work for the child because it's flooding. You force the child into that experience, which reminds them of how anxious they are, or the child starts to dig in their heels. Now you're in an argument about it. You might know these kids, but if you push on those kids, then they actually dread that issue more. You're creating a bigger and bigger complex around that thing that they're scared of. So we really want to take it more like someplace in the middle. Let's talk about skills. How can you get used to this idea? How can you get used to this new thing? How can you push back on your worry bully? Right? Get to that. And we want to take baby steps. And another story that I tell often about baby steps is, the child who's scared of swim lessons. You could take the child and throw them in the pool, but then they're never going to want to go back there again. Or you can go and say, you know what, let's go. And I'm not saying you have to go in, we're just going to go take a look. And maybe so that you go and stand on the side of the pool and you're sitting on the bleachers. And then a week or two later, maybe the next week, the child still wants to sit on the bleachers. And you suggest, 2 weeks later, can we go sit on the side? And so you're baby stepping, you're getting closer to the desired goal. And it's really important for kids who are anxiety to have these, it's called exposures in the CBT world. Exposure therapy, where gradually they're exposed to that new thing, the anxiety-provoking thing. You inch them closer, we call it baby stepping, and you baby step them closer. And then it's possible in week 6 if the child gets in the pool out of 8 weeks, but it's still a success for him or her. And then you sign them up for the next session and they got used to it. Right? This is a much more successful way that will not increase their anxiety short-term or long-term. I think this is one of the last slides. Just notice, you can be triggered. Any caregiver, including myself, can be triggered into either doing the reassurance or the pushing, because anxiety and negativity are contagious, and it can stress us out because we want so badly for the child to be okay and to benefit from this awesome experience that we want, right? So a great way to separate yourself, just so that you can kind of do this ideal Jeopardy style coaching, is to think as you approach the anxious child or the negative child, well, this is how you're feeling right now. I was having a perfectly fine day. So we want to separate your feelings. So you're not, the empathic caregiver is often soaking up the child's feelings, but mentally, this little exercise is very helpful for young therapists and for young caregivers, or just caregivers who are learning this. Okay, this is how you're feeling. This is your dance space, and this is my dance space, right? That's my Dirty Dancing homage. And with that mental separation, you can say, I have my grown-up job to do, and you have your child job to do it. I'm here to support you, right? And as I said, so baby stepping. Right now, you're worried about this. I'll ask her how she wants to handle it. I said that already. And here's the final slide. Then once the child shows any coping, I already alluded to this, we want to give them a certain type of targeted praise to reinforce, because they're at a deficit of power. They feel weak relative to their anxiety. So we want to say how powerful you are. You went back to school today. How powerful are you? What a brilliant coping idea. Nothing can stop you now, right? So these are all just phrases that have to do with how powerful, how strong, how brave the child is. We want to build up that self-narrative so the child thinks, yes, I am strong. You know, that worry bully doesn't stand a chance against you. You're like a superhero, right, for the younger child. And this is the way that we can, when we see it, we want to acknowledge it. We want to give the child credit for those powerful coping moments. Let them know we see it. It's in you. You got this. And then the last thing that I ask in terms of questions, Jeopardy questions, is, you know that there's going to be another thing coming down the pike. I wonder if you can be powerful the next time. That's one more Jeopardy question for them. And so in sum, this is what creates negativity and anxiety. It's the toilet bowl of doom, right? And anxiety begins with nature's alarm, and it creates these distortions. So we want to have them use fact, truth, and history, right? And for negativity, what lens is it that you're seeing the world with? And can you say things like, well, at least, or can you try to change that around? And there we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
So I know some of you may have other things and responsibilities that you need to go off to. And so no pressure to hang around with us. We'll probably just stay until 8:40 or so if you want to answer any questions, but no
Sure,
pressure. And this is recorded, so you can always look back. But I'm just going to read out the questions that are in our chat. So one was, what about children that don't understand the word if and thinks that if word will happen every time? That was Rachel. And Rachel, if you want to clarify or re-ask or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. So actually that question was aiming towards my son, who is 9 and doesn't, like, we say, if you don't clean up your room, this will happen, like, and he thinks that the word if is, it's gonna happen, whether he cleans it up or not, the bad thing's gonna happen.
Okay.
So every time we use that word if, he goes ballistic because he thinks that it's gonna happen, what, like, the bad thing is gonna happen.
Okay. Well, I think that you can maybe you can disprove that. You can do some very, like, just quick experiments. You can say, like, if you, let's play a game. If you get 5 points, we're going out for ice cream. So just give him, like, not like a positive negative swing, but just like a, right? And try to give him just a taste of some kind of, like, good things happening after if, and you can say, look, and it helps with many kids, but with your son, so much of my work is visual because of my art therapy background, but the benefit of it is it makes it permanent and concrete. So I would say make a list, write down the evidence of all the times where there's an if that he gets the good stuff, and then show him the evidence, hold it up and be like, look, this time, right? And then you could even have you could start to carry a running list of how many times he gets positive thens for every if, and how many times he actually gets a consequence, and he'll be able to see, put them in 2 different colors. So maybe, like, whatever, you name it, blue is like the positive thing, and red, and he'll see, look how many blues there are to every red. So he might need a very concrete and visual and permanent record to start to disprove this distorted theory that he has about ifs.
Thank you.
Does that sound? Is that good?
Yeah, thank you.
Try it.
Awesome. The other question that we had was from Emily. Emily, do you want to share it, or I can read it out?
Yeah, I can share it. So I was referring to basically the sheet of basically was like the automatic thought records, but kid friendly. And so when I use them with, like, teens or tweens or young adults, whatever, we always have them do, like, evidence for the negative thought as well. I just wanted to see what, like, if you would recommend not using that for like the younger kids, because I'm thinking about one specific kid that I'm working with, and I'm pretty sure if I used like the for the negative thought, he would go off on like all of these things.
Yeah. They're full of the negative thoughts. That's why they're struggling, right? So they got them mastered. So I don't really feel the need to include that. And for the little kids, they will absorb whatever we're teaching. And so, if there's an individual very skeptical child who says, yeah, but this could happen, that's also a part of the formula for strengthening anxiety symptoms, which is, what if is, well, it could happen, but that's where we go back to history. It could have, of course, anything could happen, but is it likely? Is it likely? And you can also, I don't know if you tell stories about, whenever there's an airline crash, right? Plane crashes, a lot of people die, and it makes it to the news. So everyone's freaked out and everyone is terrified to go on a plane briefly for several weeks or months after that, right? So anxiety goes way up, but actually, statistically, it doesn't make it any more likely that the next plane is going to go down. And there are facts that show that there are way more car accidents than there are plane crashes. It's far more dangerous to get in a car than to go on a plane. So, so there's like this emotional factor of, yes, it could happen. And that's what, the anxious person kind of holds on to. So that's where you need to use kind of like the facts and history, to try to push back on the could. Yes, it could, but is it likely? Likely is the word, and that's what, where we go to battle. And sometimes, kids, if their anxiety is really persistent and is very ingrained, they might need time and, more forceful debate. But also, everyone, I would say, anxiety actually is one of the more and most treatable, clearly treatable of the emotional behavioral challenges out there. But that being said, there is, I think, a strategy that makes sense, which is to start with an easier thing. Start with a mild anxiety. Don't go right to their hardest one that's very ingrained, that they have a lot of, well, it could happen, it could. Let's start with something more mild, right? And then let them get a couple of successes, and they can see the pattern of how fact and truth and history work to boss back worry thoughts, right? And then you can tackle a harder one. So I think there's that. And if there's very, very stubborn anxiety that is so flooding that the child can't try new thoughts or new do's, right, in the think, feel, do cycle, then sometimes and if they're not responding to therapy over 16, 20 weeks of this, then I would say, well, your child might need a medication consult, and no parent wants to have their child on medication. I know, myself included, but if my child is not getting better, I would see that that's sort of a last resort, and I would need to explore that. And that doesn't have to be forever, but if you can take that lead foot off of the child's chest, right, of anxiety, it takes that lead pressure off so that maybe they can participate better in therapy, get some successes, and then you can wean off of the meds, and now they're in the therapy process. So that's one more piece, just if you happen to have a child who's been, in sort of what's called treatment-resistant anxiety or depression.
These are very complex issues. So thank you. I know these are things we're all thinking about a lot. And so I hope that you all took a lot out of this. I know it was really helpful for me to think about in a new way. So Mike, I think you said you're sharing your slides, which is great. So we'll make sure to make that happen.
Yep.
I don't know if you put your contact information up, or if you want to share it in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out to you.
Share it in the chat. It's going to be in the slides as well, everyone. But
great. Okay, awesome.
Here is my last slide, which is You can reach me at my practice. You can email me at mike@childandfamilyarttherapycenter.com. I know it's long.
But descriptive. Well, thank you again so very much for taking the time out to share all of this with us.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
and
great questions.
and feel free to connect with us at Jewish Learning Venture. Happy JDAME, Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. I hope you'll be celebrating all month long.
And
Lisa, were you
please
gonna say
send my
something?
regards to your kids.
Oh yes, of
I
course.
will.
Everyone is connected. And thank you again so much. I'll pause the recording. I hope it worked. We'll see, I guess.